Thank you. Thank you so much, Faith, for that introduction. And I am so delighted and glad to be here again, teaching with this wonderful community of Sangha Live, this international community. And it's been a while. I haven't been on live for maybe over a year. So this is very special and precious, a combination of special and precious, and delightful to be here again. Um, our topic for the day is Refugia, and well, I'm going to talk about that during the talk. Um, Refugia, finding um, refuge in times of crisis. I do want to just mention here in the beginning that refugia is a plural of refugium. Refugium is the singular, refugia is the plural. And refugia are places of safety. And I'll unpack that more, of course, during the talk. But I wanted to just introduce that concept before we practice together, because I'll be unpacking, and even in the practice a bit, this idea of places of safety, and um, we'll be exploring a little bit the notion of invoking, making wherever you are a place of safety, which is very much the spirit of Buddhist refuge, making the place where you are a place of safety. And um, also be invoking a bit the idea of
Mm.
becoming refuge, that this body, speech, body, breath, and mind, just as it is right now, can become a place of safety. And in a certain way, I think of that as one of the main, I'd say, side effects of a meditation practice is discovering your the present moment and your own organism as this place of safety. And that can be supported by invoking community as place of safety for this body, this breath, and this mind. So I want to start that now by putting ourselves, and I'll need your help for this, into gallery view. So if you go to the upper, or I don't know, on my iPad, it's on the left side of the screen, there's a gallery view. Maybe for you on a computer, it's in a slightly different place, but if we can just bring ourselves
Know where it
into
is on
that
here?
gallery view for a moment,
It's over there.
and
Yeah.
you might see now a field of faces. And there might be several pages of faces here. So just taking a moment to take in Sangha. Sangha means, for those of you that are newer here, means community. So just taking in our community today as a place of safety. And you may need to swipe. I'm swiping left here and seeing, oh, there's more community. And just connecting with the presences here. It's so good to see your faces. Some are people are tuning in here also with their cameras off, which is just fine. It's taking in that these are our Sangha today, a place of safety and refuge. Good. So you can stay with that if you like the gallery view, or you can, on the left, you can go back to speaker view by pressing that same button if you need to or want to. So we're going to start today with a bit of practice. So let's just start by getting comfortable in your seat. And just to move into our body, taking a deep, full in breath, and filling the belly, the lungs, and a slow, full, deep out breath. Letting go of even a little bit more air than you might on a normal out breath. 3 deep inhales, 3 deep exhales at your own pace. And returning to a natural breath. And we'll begin now by invoking the outer refuge, refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And just to move us into that space, I'm going to recite the Pali refuge prayer. And if you happen to know it, you can join me. And if you don't, you can just listen to the sounds, the words, receiving them into your being. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami. Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami Sangam Sharanam Gacchami Buddham Sharanam Gacchami Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Refuge in Buddha, calling to mind your guides, teachers, the ones in whose presence you have felt safe and loved. Maybe some of these are human, some are transhuman, timeless, like the Buddha or Tara, Kuan Yin, Jesus, whoever it is for you. These sources of teaching and wisdom. Feeling their loving presence. And refuge in Dharma, bringing to mind your path, the teachings, the books, the flow of Dharma that has opened you to insight. Just feeling a deep appreciation for all those streams of wisdom, formal and informal, that have helped you wake up. feeling that stream flowing all around you, stream of Dharma. And refuge in Sangha, the friends that have walked the path with you, who have held your hands in times of trouble, the ones who showed you compassion when you needed to be seen. Your Kalyana Mitra community. Kalyana Mitra means your spiritual friend. So calling to mind your spiritual friends, family, those who are alive and those who have passed on. Feeling their loving presence around you now. Refuge in Sangha. And noticing how your body and your heart feel in the presence of refuge. The ease that comes with feeling safe. Now that you are feeling that safety in the body, turning attention to it, feeling the base of your body against the cushion or chair. Feeling the pull of gravity on every cell in the body. keeping you close to the earth. Solid, stable, and grounded. Refuge in the body. Noticing how in this stable, grounded body, there is flow, the cool, fresh inhale, the warm, soft exhale, and the space between. Refuge in the breath. And feeling the sense of the past fall away. Letting this impulse to anticipate the future release. falling into this present moment. This natural mind. Refuge in present moment mind.
Willa. A few people,
Yes?
a few people have been having some issues with the sound. For me, you're very clear, but
Oh,
it might be that my speakers are more sensitive. So either if you can turn your mic up or adjust the distance from the mic.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Maybe people can write in the chat if you still can't hear, please.
Can you hear me? I sound all right. Is it hard to hear me? Okay. Very clear all along. Okay. All right. And, I can try to speak up. I'll speak up a bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know that. So lately, I've been exploring the concept of refugia. Refugia is a term that comes out of ecology and biology. And more recently, it has been a term that's been used a lot in the field of climate science. And what this term means, refugia, are places of ecological refuge in times of profound climatic or ecological change. So these are places of safety in the natural world that help species and ecosystems to survive change. And these days, of course, one of the main changes that scientists are interested in have to do with the ones that are precipitated by the change in the climate. So I've been interested in this term because as I started to research it a bit more, I first heard it from a friend who's a climate scientist. And I started to look into it because of the similarity between the term refugia and this idea that we have that's so central, the Buddhist practice of refuge. So as I started to look into it, I discovered that refugia serve as a kind of a slow lane to buffer the effects of change, protecting species and ecosystems. So these are pockets of climate stability, and examples of some of these pockets are caves, valleys between mountains, islands, boreal peatlands. And what these refugia have in common is that they are protected from, say, changes that are happening on a wider scale in the globe. And sometimes they're protected physically, say by rock, or they're protected by their, could say their permeability, like the peatlands. So the peat, is this moss, and there are lots of air pockets in the moss, and those air pockets store water, and that water is important for the survival of many species. So that's an example. It's holding together a certain kind of microclimate that allow these species to survive. So these are places of stability that are protected. These are refuges, you might say, in the physical world. And And in looking into it, what commonalities are there in these refugia? And of course, I'm getting to how this relates to our practice and relates to refuge. Some of the qualities in refugia, common qualities, are these places provide stable environment, stable temperature, stable water availability, stable light or lack thereof. Sometimes darkness is needed for some species to survive, for example. Stable availability of carbon, and also community. So, community of similar beings. So, so in thinking about that, I've been thinking a lot during the pandemic and since the pandemic about the importance of of refuge in the physical world, like finding places that qualify as safe and protected survival caves, if you will. And what does that mean for us as practitioners and as human beings? So I've been thinking about that, reflecting on that. Um, what are the places that help us to survive, but not only survive, but also thrive? And why that's important, not just from a species point of view, from a human point of view, but also from a Dharma point of view, like becoming a refuge of, of peace ourselves, how we need refuge of peace for the organism before we can provide peace to others. So, so we too, in times of crisis, need places of safety, places of relative stability. And And I think sometimes as practitioners, at least myself as a practitioner, I used to think about practice, meditation practice, as sort of the thing that I would do so that I don't need these places of safety, that any place that I have can become a place of safety. And of course, right, in the sort of in the long term, that is a goal of our practice to become the refuge ourselves. But in order to become the refuge, even to start down a path of becoming refuge, we need to feel safe ourselves first. And the Buddha knew this. He knew this. So in the very early part of his life, after attaining his awakening under the Bodhi tree and going to Deer Park to teach the first disciples, teach the Four Noble Truths, very much in that early phase, he began to talk about refuge and that it was the first practice of someone who wanted to embark on a path to awakening, to nirvana, to enlightenment, to opening to the wisdom of the universe. The very first step, he said early in his teaching days, was the step of finding refuge, finding refuge. And it turns out that now, why refugia is a thing right now in climate science is because scientists are doing the same. They're seeking refugia. They need to know, they're actually mapping refugia across the world, finding the places of safety for the squirrels and the rabbits and the polar bears and the penguins, figuring out where are the places that preserve safety for these species. So, in the same way, the Buddha suggested, right, refuges for us, the refuge of Buddha, the refuge of Dharma, the refuge of Sangha, as a place of safety, spiritual safety, where we can find support, find sources of wisdom, find leadership or guidance. We might say find guidance, like refuge in Buddha, find guidance, and then also find those qualities of friendship, Sangha, that allow us to continue on our path. So he talked about these sources of refuge. The Buddha understood early on that in order even to meditate, we first need support, and we also need safety, a place where we can relax, if you will. You know, we need a field of safety. So he would encourage his students to remember Buddha, source of wisdom, source of compassion, right? Sources of love, Buddha, Dharma, the sources of wisdom, our own path, that which has brought us insight, Dharma, and then Sangha, spiritual friendship, people to walk the path with. So encouraged his students, the Buddha, from the very beginning to develop a field of spiritual safety before practicing meditation, before really going deep with our meditation. And in fact, in most Buddhist traditions now, the beginning of every meditation session, there's a practice of refuge. And so, what I wanted to bring into the call today is to think about not just refuge as this sort of codified, prepackaged thing that comes from a Buddhist tradition. Here's Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, our prepackaged refuge, which it's a beautiful refuge, but to think about what's underlying that, which is this impulse to find safety before we open up to something as boundless as awakening and as deep as awakening and as deconstructing as awakening is. To start with finding your place of safety. And so to think about it not so much as a pre-codified Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, but to think about it more as what do I need, I need as a practitioner to feel safe and therefore relaxed and easeful, to enter into the depth of practice. What do I need? Because this is somewhat also unique to each person. So, for example, when I ask myself the question, and maybe we can do this here right now, just here on the call, to ask yourself the question, in whose presence do you feel safe? And I'll tack on, and loved. Maybe we can even tack on one more, and seen. In whose presence do I feel safe? Ah, I love that someone's writing. Yeah, you can go ahead and write in the chat if you want. That would be nice. If you feel sort of inspired to write in the chat. Safe, loved, and seen. And it's interesting, right? My dog, the redwoods. Oh, awesome. Right, when we ask that question, what comes is not necessarily Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? What comes to me is right now, in this moment, is the natural world, like the wild world. I feel really safe and seen. I just took a walk this morning in the woods. I just hiked up to Bog Mountain with my dog and my stepmother before this call. And we were hiking through these pine forests, and I had that feeling. I found refuge as I was walking up. So kind of keeping tabs on your organism. In what places do I feel those things? With which people do I feel that? Like I feel that with my um, one of my close Dharma friends, right? So when I meditate, I invoke that close Dharma friend, and I invoke the forest, and I invoke my dog Luna, and I invoke, right? So let's ask ourselves that question: just in who or what presence? And then just just permission. Start your practice with that question instead of, just the rote refuge. Start with the question and then see what arises, and then let that be your refuge tree for the day. We might say like a natural refuge tree, a natural refuge field. So in the beginning of our practice, not so much taking refuge like we do, and I did it this morning because I find it to be such a, this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever we are, I find it to be such a rich, I love to chant the Pali refuge. I love to see in my invoked Buddha Dharma Sangha, but I also surround that with these beings in whose presence I feel safe and loved, and I include that in my meditation practice. So just that kind of permission to think about refuge not so much as a codified thing, but more as a refugium, a place where your organism survives and thrives. A place, quote unquote, could be actual place, but could also be human connection, animal connection, spirit connection. And that actually, this thing that we call taking refuge is a practice of nurturing our connections to these refugium in our lives. And that by nurturing those connections, we are actually engaged in a practice. And that practice is a practice of refuge, and it's an awakening practice, not a secular practice alone, but also an awakening practice, creating the refugium so that we can truly let go and let be, that we can open to the spaciousness and to the luminous quality of our true nature, that we need this refuge in order to allow that which is innate within us, the wisdom within us, to become manifest. And so when I was a young Dharma student in my 20s, which seems now like such an eternity ago, I once received a teaching from one of my root teachers back in the day, in the 80s, when I was really getting deep, I think taking the deep dive into the Dharma and taking ordination as a nun. So one of those early teachings that I received from one of my Tibetan teachers, he was kind of a very old man at the time. He was in his mid 80s, and I first met him in a Dharma center in San Francisco. He was a very old Tibetan Lama who had come out of Tibet with the Cultural Revolution. And he used to teach that there was not just 3 refuges, but that there are 9 refuges. And I find that teaching still very, very rich, coming from the perspective of refugium. When I'm talking about here, the essence of refuge being the places of safety that we find where we can survive and thrive. right? Refugium. And that whatever qualities those have, that is refugium. Not coming from the outside, but coming from the inside. So he used to give this teaching of the 9 refuges. And of course, the first 3, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha as guide or guides, so even making it a little bit more general, not necessarily this one individual who lived 2,500 years ago, but the principle of teachers and guides, whether they be embodied or transcendent. Dharma, second refuge, not just the teachings of the Buddha, but also all the teachings that open us to non-dual wisdom, all the teachings that help us dissolve the shackles of ego, all those teachings, whatever form they might take as Dharma, and then Sangha as those who walk the path with us. So when he first gave that teaching, he talked about those people as having qualities of compassion and kindness and wisdom. So finding the friends that walk the path with us that offer through their being, their way of being, kindness, compassion, and wisdom. So it's not just any friends, but really looking out for those friends. So I'm summarizing the teaching that he gave because it has stayed with me all of these years. So then those are the first 3 refuges, and he called those the outer refuges, the outer refuges. And then he talked about inner refuges, the 3 inner refuges. And he talked about those as body. So instead of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, body, breath, and mind. So refuge in the body, finding ease and safety in the body, body as a place of safety, as a place of refuge. And then, of course, you can see right now, just even thinking about that, how complicated that can be. So, starting to discern, right, between the impermanent, deteriorating body and the sense of present moment body. That could be a place of refuge, even if we're very sick, even if we're chronically ill. Noticing that there are parts of the body that are chronically ill, and there's also experiences of the body, even within the present moment, that we can take refuge in, that we can find places of refuge, even if our body isn't entirely in balance. And then refuge in breath. So, refuge in breath, just noticing this cool, fresh inhale and this warm, soft exhale, and the space between is a kind of safety. To just be with breath settles us, calms our nervous system, and puts us in this place of being really present, kind of refuge. So refuge in body, refuge in breath, and then refuge in mind. And when he talked about refuge in mind, he talked about refuge not in the monkey mind, not in the conceptual mind, but in something that he called the nature of mind, or the essence of mind, which means refuge in our basic wakeful awareness, the present moment awareness. So, not the awareness that's distracted, but this very fundamental quality that it's just present, moment to moment. You might say base consciousness, refuge in that. So, the second 3 refuges are refuge in body, breath, and mind, which he called those the inner refuges. And then he talked about 3 more refuges. And you might guess what those might be. If there's an outer refuge and there's an inner refuge, what's the third? He called it the secret refuge, the level of secret refuge. And the secret refuge is refuge in the most subtle qualities of our Buddha mind or our non dual awareness. And what are those most subtle qualities? The three innermost or secret refuges. He talked about them as first, the spaciousness of your awareness, and secondly, the cognizance of your awareness, meaning the bright or luminous quality of our present moment mind, if you will. And the third refuge, the fertility of our awareness, meaning this incredible quality of the mind that is just this never ending unfolding of what is arising in the present moment. This, might say, this flow of constant miraculous display arising out of that base consciousness. So, refuge in spaciousness, cognizance, and fertility, meaning these three qualities of our base consciousness, which is a very subtle understanding of refuge. And of course, even to take refuge in those qualities, we have to be meditating for a while to sort of notice, oh, the mind is so much more than just the monkey mind, that there's something underneath that out of which everything is arising, out of which our appearances are arising, out of which our monkey mind itself is arising, and that we can get in touch with that through the practice of meditation. So he called that the secret refuge. And I think the word secret, not so much like concealed from other people, like secret as in keeping a secret, not that way, but secret as in it's secret from us, secret from each of us until we've practiced enough to notice it, right? It is secret from us, it's concealed from us until we've practiced enough to see there's a spaciousness here and there's a bright or luminous quality to this present moment awareness. And there is this unimpeded fertility of the mind too. And these all are happening at the same time. These are like fundamental qualities of our base consciousness. Very intriguing to me at the time. Can you imagine? I'm 21, 2021, and hearing this and felt so inspired to practice just by that notion of these three separate refuges. So I'm aware we are getting on in the time, and I want to open it to everyone, but just to kind of transition here from what I was saying about the 9 refuges to this notion of refugium is just how we're entering at this time into an unprecedented history of the world. I mean, we are a part of that history, and it's a history where things are going to become challenging in the natural world and the environment that we live in. And even if we don't think in those broad global terms, part of being human is encountering the difficult. It's like a part of our path, the human. And so, just like the climate scientists are trying now to find and identify a refugium before the full crisis hits, I think in some ways our challenge and our task as meditators is to establish our spiritual refugium before our personal crises in this human life hit. That's part of our development. And it's been so for me, very much so since the pandemic, really thinking about what refuge is, what it constitutes, what does it look like. So I just wanted to share it with you today. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. And and before I open it up just for questions, and then I will for you to raise your hands, is just a reminder about Faith's kind reminder about Donna, and just a request as a teacher to remember the Donna part of our reciprocity as teacher and Sangha. Just a little reminder about that. And she'll put a link or something, I guess, in the chat, or yeah, for that to be possible. Thank you so much. And please raise your hands because I want to hear from you and I'd love to see you too. So if you want to raise your hand, Faith will call on you and we can be side by side on the screen and I can see your face and hear from you. Thank you. You can also put your questions in the chat too. Feel free to do that or raise your hand. And Faith, you can help me be with that. Because I can't see raised hands. I know that's
Yeah,
possible.
I don't see any yet either.
Okay, thank
Like we're
you.
still
And it
waiting.
could just be a comment, or I can ask you guys a question. Where do you find refuge? That's my question. What's refugium for you in the spiritual sense? And or maybe, spiritual and non-spiritual, it's also connected. I don't even know where to draw the line anymore. Yeah, Colette, thank you. Oh, you can't unmute. You're having trouble unmuting? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think Faith, you have to help them unmute. I think. Oh, there we go. You unmuted there for a second, Colette, but now it's muted again. Let's see. Faith, can you help us
Okay,
out there?
got it. Thank you, Willa. My question to you is, what do you do as a practice to establish the most subtle secret refugia?
The most subtle secret. No, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I I like all the refuge I can invoke. So when you say the most subtlest and most secret, I've actually had to relearn as I've grown older, that I need relative refuge as well as ultimate refuge. So like the most secret and subtle is taking refuge in my own natural awareness. And that's profound for me. But it's not enough for me. And that took me a long time to learn. I used to think that's all we need, but now I believe um, we need a lot more to thrive than that. And so now I take refuge primarily in spiritual friendship. I might even put that at the top, and community, because without spiritual friendship and community, and when I say community, I mean animal and human and natural world community. I mean the trees and the plants. I mean deep sense of being interconnected with that. And that includes physically. So, like my dog Luna, my life is significantly different and improved by my connection to my dog Luna, which includes my ability to be refuge to others. So now I've sort of inverted it. If you'd asked me in my 20s, I would have said, I take refuge in the nature of my mind. That's all we really need. But now I'm like in my late 50s and I'm like, no, it's not. So that's an answer to your question. Yeah. And I, just being wise about what it is for us, because it isn't the same, is it, for everyone? Each of us has our own needs for what constitutes safe harbor is different for each person. Thank you, Colette. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, don't be shy, because don't be shy at all. Whatever question you might have, others have too, for sure. I see James there. Hi, James.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much.
Where are you? Let's
I'm
share
in
our locations.
Allentown, Pennsylvania, about an
Okay.
hour outside Philadelphia.
Okay.
I was encouraged by what you were saying. I sometimes feel like I need to take notes and make lists, but I woke up today in a bit of a funk, feeling a little depressed, and I intuitively knew that to go for a walk in the park always helps. So I commune with nature. To try and get in more of a walking meditation than just letting my mind run wild, then reconnects me with my basic consciousness, which is another refuge for me. To text with some Sangha, some other friends from my group, and I'll end up going to an AA meeting later tonight. So I intuitively know that there, the sense of community, a sense of presence, of consciousness, slowing my mind down and getting into nature, all of those things come to me somewhat naturally without, and I have been practicing for a few years and been in a 12-step program for 7 years. So I've been taught these things, but I didn't used to know these things. But thank you for reiterating, and I do think it's important to constantly try and grow whatever that might be that feels like refuge, and recognize it. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, James. I just want to name how you are finding refuge. It sounds like in circles of care, your AA group, your Sangha, and how powerful those circles can be. That's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, this whole notion of a pod, our pods, right? That we had these, or we were encouraged to stay in the pods, which of course was very hard and isolating. But even the notion of a group of people that we can trust and be near, as a notion, our practice is the creating of these intersecting circles of care is a beautiful notion. Thank you for bringing that into the room, James. Thanks. Nice to meet you. Hi, Linda. Where are you?
Am I unmuted? I'm in Tucson, Arizona, where we will soon dip down into double digits Fahrenheit, and I can't wait. Thank you so much for this. I was struck by, I have done your Wakeful Body online course as well, and today was just struck by how helpful this was in terms of safety. I've been trying to get the idea that the mind-body connection is more than just a polysyllabic for the neck, trying to overcome the cultural and personal training to live in my head and really connect to my body. But that's slower than I wish. As much as the 3 secret refuges appeal to me, I'm still really trying to understand how often I am not feeling safe in my body, just connecting to my body at a very basic level. Your talk today spoke to that, I thought, beautifully interweaving, leaving some of the more subtle refuges, aspirational goals for me. But I also wanted to say that I have very much enjoyed your refuge tree meditation on Insight Timer. And I heard echoes of that today as well. So thank you so much. Something here for everyone, the advanced and the still trying to get there.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing your reflections and appreciation. Thank you.
So in the chat, we have 2 questions. So Josephine writes, I love this notion of taking refuge. Could you describe what the felt sense of refuge feels like for you? I'm noticing that my tendency to understand in the mind, I'm noticing that my tendency is to understand in the mind, yet I'm wanting more clarity in an embodied sense of refuge. Thanks.
That's a great question. I think the body has so much to teach us about refuge. So I would say the most powerful sense of what refuge feels like to me is invoked when I'm in the presence of someone with whom I feel safe and loved. I mean, it comes down to that. So in the presence of a beloved, and right now I don't have a mate, but I have my dog Luna, and I feel, I feel that with her, like the really embodied sense of belonging. I belong to Luna as much as she belongs to me, and my body knows that sense of safety. So for myself, it comes through connection to a beloved other or others. I feel it with Sangha. I feel that sense of relaxation and safety, especially with Sangha, with whom I'm more familiar because, we've built up a history of seeing each other and being seen by each other, or my Aunt Marianne, my Aunt Marianne, my 90-year-old aunt who has known me my whole life. And when I'm in her presence, I feel this sense of ease and relaxation. But that being said, in some ways, now for me, those feelings have become much less conditional. They used to be more conditional, like I need to be near Aunt Marianne or I need to be near my dog. But if you have a regular practice of refuge, you feel that much less because every time you sit down to practice, every time I sit down to practice, I invoke refuge, sources of refuge in whose presence I feel safe and loved. So you can create an unconditional field of refuge by invoking those sources of refuge, invoking my Aunt Marianne, invoking my dog Luna, whether or not I'm with her at the moment, invoking the Buddha or Tara. I feel very safe in her presence. So the embodied feeling, that was your question, is a sense of relaxation and heart opening. I think those are 2 qualities that allow us to bridge towards awakening because once our body is easeful, so I feel the relaxation in my body as soon as I touch my dog and as soon as I invoke a refuge field, I feel this sense of a great exhale and then heart opening, like this sense of the safety allows the heart can now open because it feels safe. And then once that we're relaxed and our heart is open, if we start to practice, we are wide open to receive whatever vipassana, whatever insight might come our way, might be there in the field. Now we're attuned and ready for it. We're not closed off, we're not knotted up, we're not enmeshed in our thinking mind. We're happy to be present and not much else. I don't know if that's sort of, if you asked me to describe it, that's how I would describe it. Thank you for the question. Yeah. Just, finding how do you feel when you feel safe and loved, like getting really into that. And then that for me is what refuge is about, that feeling. are we doing on our time? Oh, we're good. Golden. We have another few minutes. Hi, Charles.
Hi. I came a little late this morning, unfortunately. Was unavoidable, but I got in just before the question and answer, but I've been listening and I sort of find something that may sound a little oxymoronic, but I find that, at least for myself, it's easy to confuse refuge with withdrawal and avoidance and hiding.
Okay.
In other words, uh, and I find, at least I found, especially since I'm relatively new to the practice, maybe a year and a half now, but I found that if you really face your challenges and the chaotic world, et cetera, and you stop grasping to your refuge of choice in the past, withdrawal, hiding, pulling the covers over your head, and you allow yourself to step back and become aware and give yourself space. And usually that's not to exclude the Sangha and others. That facilitates, I think, the refuge process. That the refuge can be found in being open and aware in the luminosity of everything. And so the anxiety and the fears sort of dissipate. And that is, for me, is the refuge in the sense of it's my antidote to the challenges that I encounter. So I don't need to run from them. If I face them, then I get the relief that I need. And of course, definitely Sangha, family, friends. I mean, that's what life is all about, not the material stuff. So there you go.
Yes. Well, I appreciate, Charles, that's so good. Also, just the notion that we can be dysfunctional about refuge. We could take refuge in our addictions. We could take refuge um, in our negative emotions and like indulge those. And we can take refuge in conceptuality. We can take refuge in false beliefs. We can take refuge um, in our fears. So yeah, when you widen the notion of refuge to whatever it is that we turn to, including our strategies of avoidance, then yeah, you could see it as there's some dysfunctional ways of taking refuge that involve escaping the difficult, and our practice, like you so eloquently put it, is about turning towards those difficulties and leaning in to the difficult things, and even embracing them, embracing what they bring up, because the only way out is through. So that resonates, Charles, with my experience. Thank you for bringing
Thank
that
you.
in. Yeah, thank you.
Another question in the chat, Willa.
Okay.
Would you be able to repeat the 9 refuges your teacher described, please?
Okay. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. That's the first 3. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And then body, breath, and mind. That's the second 3. Body, breath, and mind. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Body, breath, and mind. Understood as present moment body, present moment breath, present moment mind. In other words, refuge in our own experience as it is. Not as we want it to be, but as it is. And then refuge in the final 3, which is spaciousness, meaning the spaciousness of our ground consciousness, luminosity or cognizance, refuge in the cognizant nature of our ground consciousness. And the third is refuge in the fertility of our ground consciousness. Fertility understood as the unimpeded flow arising from our ground consciousness. And these 3 fundamental qualities, sometimes called the 3 natures of consciousness, are stable. Even though the appearances are changing, those 3 qualities of ground consciousness are stable. And so if we notice those stable qualities of our mind or our awareness, however you want to put it, our present moment experience, then that's a place we can rest, even when everything else seems to be falling apart. And there's something really powerful about that. We might call that the innermost refuge, something like that.
Thank you. And last one from Neil. Neil says, for me, I'm struggling with a separation, possibly a downside of losing refuge, safe refuge and safe place, of a downside of losing refuge, safe place creates anxiety.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It sure does. It sure does. Yes. And yes. And yet we still need these places of refuge. And that's, Neil, that's actually why we need the 9 refuges. Because if we just stop with 3, those could change, right? We could lose our teacher, or we could lose, just an example, we lose our most amazing Bible sutra, right? Just in the present moment, right? We lose it somehow, and we're like full of anxiety that we've lost my Satipatthana Sutra, my copy of my Satipatthana Sutta, or whatever. We can get attached to these refuges and to Kalyanamitta, of course, attached to our spiritual friendships. Of course we are. So we need to keep working deeper. And that's why there are these 9 refuges. That's why we go to the level of the inner refuges, body, breath, and mind, and start to understand that this organism is a safe place. But even this organism is mortal. So we have to go even a little bit further and understand that Buddha nature is stable. Or we could say ground consciousness is what we would say in the Tibetan tradition. I'm more Tibetan trained, so I would say that, or awareness, just words. It's all words. But in other traditions, Zen might call it Buddha nature, and Theravada Buddhism might call it Nibbana, right? Nirvana itself, taking refuge in awakening itself. So if we keep going deeper, then we're going to a place of refuge that we can't lose eventually. So that's the reason to keep going deeper. But it's not a reason, even though these refuges are impermanent and changing, we still need to keep cultivating that the presence of refuge. But I so appreciate what you're saying about we lose a refuge and how triggering that is. And so, but it doesn't mean we don't need those places of safety, right? So it's a conundrum, and so then we work with the attachment, not so much with the places, but with our attachment to those places, valuing them, needing them, and letting go as much as we can of the attachment. It's the lifelong Dharma path, the challenge of the Dharma path, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone. And I want to return to gallery view. I know we have to go in a minute, but I just want to see everyone's faces while I say thank you to all of you, and feel free to unmute to say goodbye if you'd like. You're welcome to do that. It's so good to see you, and thank you so much for having me, Faith and Sangha Live today.